So we're moving on to Nicole Chew-Helbig, who's in private practice in Singapore.
Yes.
Nicola, where I'm trying to see where you are.
I'm in Singapore.
Oh yes. Oh, there you are. I found you. Hi. So Nicola is going to talk to us. The title of her talk is "A Psychotherapist's Lived Experience in Session with an Asylum Seeker and Translator." It's an autoethnographic case study. So over to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. If I imagine myself as an autoethnographer now, I'm like an ethnographer, a researcher entering a field, and this field is this conference right in front of my screen. And as I'm sitting here, I'm aware of being included and also not included. So I'm aware of this phenomenon that's happening for me, of feeling myself as being part of the group and also feeling different from the group. So that's where I'm starting from in the true Gestalt therapist fashion. So I'm going to share my screen right now, because having the PowerPoint does help me to feel a bit more relaxed. Yeah, so can you see? Okay, can you see this? Yeah, okay. So this is the title of the article that I submitted in the European Journal of Psychotherapy and Counseling. And I'm really thankful that it got accepted, because you know, there's something at the back of my mind that says that I don't belong in the research world because I'm a practitioner, and I'm someone who tells stories. So I'm currently doing my doctorate with the University, Sigmund Freud University of Vienna. And I'm trying to find my place as a psychotherapy researcher and as a practitioner at the same time. And professionally, I identify myself foremost as a practitioner, so as a psychotherapist. And I do nothing but be in contact with clients day in and out. And when this opportunity came for me to submit this article, I thought this is a great place for me to share some wonderful moments that I have experienced with this particular client. And there were many other clients, and so I'm so glad to be able to do that. At the same time, I'm aware that I'm telling a story. So yeah, so I can say that Gestalt therapy found me when I was already in my 40s. By then, I had lived more than a decade in Austria. It was then that I stumbled onto a Gestalt therapy workshop. So I was impacted by the contact that I could make with people at the workshop. And something profound has changed for me, and I changed. And I'm aware that that change didn't happen just because a number of people grouped together. Change happened because there were therapists there who were attuned to what was present, and they were dedicated to the work. So I consider myself very lucky that the first therapist that I had met had made such an impression on me. And my curiosity has led me to enroll in the university after having left school 25 years before with a biochemistry degree. And I yearned to grasp what I had experienced as a client in therapy. And I tried to read more about therapy and about how therapy works and how therapists work and that kind of thing. But actually nothing could justly explain my experience as a client in those magical moments of therapy. So years later, having put myself through school again, and now writing a doctorate dissertation, I still find myself a seeker. And in this discourse that we're having about how do we work with diverse groups, right? At the end of the day, we are also interested in how do we work in diverse group in the psychotherapeutic session, because after all, we are psychotherapists. So I'm a seeker I find myself more not of a researcher, but a seeker to understand what psychotherapy is versus what the world thinks psychotherapy is about. And to understand what is psychotherapeutic change versus what kind of change is expected of therapy. So this leads me somehow to proposing a methodology to learn or to get a feel more of what really happens in the psychotherapeutic encounter, so that therapists can learn from each other's experience. So, and somehow this article that I have submitted, Psychotherapist Lived Experience, is a combination of it's a distillation of the work that I have been doing. And there are two parts to this article. One is the story, the case story, which is the psychotherapist, my lived experience in session with an asylum seeker and a translator. And actually the other part is the methodology, which is something that I feel dearly about. So I will start first to very briefly describe the methodology. Autoethnography is, the method that I use here is an adaptation of autoethnography. And autoethnography is actually a qualitative research method traditionally applied to social studies. So to apply autoethnography in psychotherapy case study, I would need to make certain definitions and to be a bit clear about how we define certain things. Like, so the method is a qualitative case study research method. The therapist is the autoethnographer. So when I say that I come into any group, any function as a newcomer or as a participant, I'm also an ethnographer if I'm studying that field. The field is, in this case, is the therapeutic situation. And this includes the client and the therapeutic encounter. So everything that is part of the therapy situation. And in every research, we look for data, and the data is driven from the therapist session notes, which we all have, and a recollection of the lived experience of the encounter. Autoethnography is special because it involves a reflexive form of writing. It's a heuristic process where new insights emerge for the researcher. And the case studies are stories that are theory-driven and also theory-enhancing. What do we choose to be worthy for research? It has to be substantive in contribution to the field. It has to have a scientific perspective. It has to have aesthetic merit. That means it has to invite interpretive responses, to be artistically shaped, and to be satisfying, complex, and not boring. Because ultimately we want therapists to read and learn from therapists. And it's also the reflexivity, is to show the author's subjectivity, self-exposure, and the reader can make their own judgment from the work. And it also meant to generate emotional and intellectual response and questions. So in writing these stories, we hope to create more questions than answers. Okay, so then of course, when we tell stories about other people's sessions, we need to care about ethical considerations. So we only choose topics very carefully. Be mindful that the therapist and the subjects and the clients are all vulnerable. To publish nothing that one would not wish for the persons being written about to read. To be very phenomenological in the way we approach the writing, that means to show and not tell. And to publish only that which holds truth and relevance to the target audience. So this is the background of the method that I've used to write the story that I've submitted. Okay, so now we go to the case story. This case story is entitled Undercurrent. It's a story of diversity in a way, and the will for inclusion within the therapeutic encounter. That means while we are concerned about what's happening in the world, in the wider field, but when we are with the client, how do we practice just that, inclusion and diversity and acceptance and phenomenology, reckoning, and all that, because we do come in with our own biases, with our own fields, and we cannot avoid that. So the case story is based on my experience of working with a patient some years ago, with whom I shared hardly any word with because we didn't share the same language. And this was the year 2018, before the COVID pandemic happened. And it was the time of the refugee crisis in Austria. Ali is a 30-year-old guy, and he fled Afghanistan and was seeking asylum in Austria. And just remember what the sentiment was in Austria at that time with the flood of asylum seekers coming in. He was brought to the psychotherapy clinic in which I was working in back then, and diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And then there was me, and I am the therapist, and also in this research method, the ethnographer coming into the field. And I'm from Singapore, and back then I was in my 40s. And because we don't speak the same language, we had with us a translator. Her name is Zaya, who was also about the same age as I was. She's a mother of two, and she was from Iran. So in this story, we appreciate how different, how diverse we are. It's beyond language. The diversity is beyond language. We had the gender differences, we had social status, cultural differences, even the visas that we had to live in Austria, because that's one thing we had in common, is that we were all foreigners in Austria at that time. So what I've written in this story is a weave of what I have experienced, of my lived experience in these 9 months that I was working with Zaya and Ali, and how we moved even through language, even when language seemed to be a barrier, and how we brought the suffering that was hidden in the field, which we call the pathos of the field, and we brought it up to make what is unseen seen and shared. So that was the work that the story that I'm telling in this article. There's not much time to tell the story, but so I guess there's always time to read the article later on. This is an example of my therapist notes. It's not very complicated. It's just scribblings, and this is an example of the case notes, a snippet of the case notes from the day that we did a chair work. See, these are the chairs, because I'm a Gestalt therapist, so we do chair work. And Ali brought a dream, and we decided to put his dream out there like a constellation, like a play on the stage. And there was Ali, and then there was me and Zaya, and then there was empty chairs where he put his father, some mafias that was chasing him, and some friends. And even this session was also told in this story. So yeah, so just to appreciate that, it can, this kind of story can be told with every therapeutic situation, because we all do come in, whether we think that we are similar or not, with our own phenomenological fields and our own suffering. So let me share the concluding paragraph, at least for what I've written in this, after I've written the story. We gathered for 9 months, 3 months longer than we had contracted to work together. In this field, a story and plot emerge. Ali's plot toggles between content of his past and his future. From his past, we hear of his suicide attempts, the violent treatment he endured from his uncle, the friends he had lost in the war. We heard of his concerns for the women he had left behind in Afghanistan, who had protected him, his uncle's wife, and the mother of his friend named also Ali. We hear also of betrayal. Ali's future, on the other hand, promises hope and despair and uncertainty. But what we had together in that therapeutic situation was in the here and now, like a pivot, holding space in an undifferentiated situation. So one can see how this writing is very different from academic writing, and it comes across as being easier to read. But oftentimes, academic articles that are easiest to read are the hardest to write. In many sense, it takes courage and creativity to write reflexively. And it's also a lonely experience of introspection, because once, as I was writing, new things came up and new insights came out that I didn't know existed, that was new for me even 6 years later. And it was also a humbling experience for me, for allowing myself as a researcher to be vulnerable in the work of exposing myself as a therapist. And therein lies a measure also of experiencing shame. But from this act of writing, we as therapists can also gain and share with each other the gift of reflection and of knowledge, and of also wisdom. And that's why yeah, I'm really happy to have the chance to put forward not just the story, but also the method. And I will end by sharing with you a quotation from philosopher Hannah Arendt. And she says, "What is really important to me is to understand. For me, writing is the integral part of this process of understanding. Writing establishes certain things. If I manage to process my thoughts adequately in writing, that satisfies me. I do not see myself as influential. I see myself as somewhat of an onlooker. For if others understand the way I understood, that gives me a sense of satisfaction, like being among equals." So I end here. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much. Oh, so much. There's so much there. We just got a few minutes for questions, so I think we'll go straight into questions and comments.
I'll say something. Just coming to me, it's not fully formed, but I'm aware we haven't got time, so I haven't got time to think it through. But that last quote about understanding and the importance of understanding, I think I've come across that before. I wonder though what negative impact as therapists our desire to understand can have on clients who maybe haven't come to understand themselves yet, and what your thoughts on that are, Nicole.
May I get understand what you're asking?
Well, I suppose that quote evokes the sense of me in me of my need sometimes to try and understand clients' worlds, what they're going through, but then I'm having to rein myself in as someone who's still relatively inexperienced and just say, well, actually, I've got to be, I need to be set by the client's pace in their journey to understand themselves. I was something around understanding there. As I said, I hadn't really fully fleshed out.
There, sometimes we don't, there's many different ways of understanding. Sometimes we think we understand in words. And when we look at the aesthetics of the field, of being together with the client, sometimes there are no words. We can feel something, but there are no words. And sometimes they come in metaphors or in imagery. And I think the process of therapy for me is a constant not knowing, of seeking to understand. And does that answer?
Yeah, I had a sense of that. And it was interesting that you ended on something about understanding, because it's sort of there's that tension that Julia's been referring to all day. Sort of,
yes, it's about it's a research method, and the therapy process at the same time is about understanding, because we can talk about case studies, but then we don't really understand what really goes on, what really happened. And sometimes there's more than words that's needed to be shared.
Nicole, oh, sorry. Are you going down?
You go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I think you write beautifully in your article, Nicole, and I think you really capture that process with your clients so well. And I just wanted to ask you how you approach the issue of client consent for writing about this in autoethnography.
I start every session with all my clients with them knowing that I am a researcher. And if I find the client again, they get to read the article. That's why I'm really careful. The part where they have to be able, we have to be okay with them reading it before I choose the stories in the first place. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you.